I kept the small blue notebook from those 8 years. It is not on a shelf. It is in a box in the closet of a one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, 4 months after they read my name out loud at the Kingdom Hall and told everyone I had ever loved to stop speaking to me. What I want to tell you tonight is what was inside that notebook. Dated columns in my husband's handwriting in cheap blue ballpoint. The first column was the start day of my menstrual cycle. The second column was every night we had intimacy. The third column was a private rating system he had invented on a scale from 1 to 5 of how willing I had seemed. He kept it in the top drawer of his nightstand, next to his personal copy of Shepherd the Flock of God. He was a ministerial servant being groomed for elder. He was 23 when he started writing in it. I was 19. He was not breaking the rules of our religion when he tracked me like that. He was following them. The doctrine called headship told him my body was a stewardship he would account for to Jehovah. 23 months of dated entries. A spiritual ledger. That is what I want to tell you about. Not what one man did to me, but what the organization allowed him to do and called holy. If you have ever sat in the marriage where your silence was treated as your virtue, stay in this room with me. Subscribe and leave a comment, because every voice you add is one more woman who hears the next one of these and recognizes the shape of her own life. Stay with me through this. The morning of October 14th, 2017, the hallway of the Kingdom Hall in Mansfield smelled like hairspray and floor polish. I was 18. Daniel Hoffman was 22. Both of us were virgins. Both of us had been told, since we were 13, that the first night of the marriage was the moment our bodies finally became permitted to each other, inside the boundaries Jehovah had drawn. There was no dancing at the reception. There was no alcohol. The basement of the Mansfield North congregation smelled like coffee urns and warm punch, and someone had taped paper flowers to the support beams. My mother Ellen kissed my forehead and said, "Be a worthy wife." I had a copy of The Secret of Family Happiness in my overnight bag. Pink hardcover, 1996 edition, with a yellow post-it on chapter 5. The post-it was hers. She had written on it in pencil, "Read this together the first night." We did not. Daniel had read it alone on the plane to Cleveland for the convention the summer before, and he had underlined chapter 5 in pen so hard the paper had buckled. He thought he had prepared. He had prepared the way our religion teaches a young brother to prepare, which is to say, he had read about marriage from a book published in Brooklyn and never spoken to a single human being about what was actually about to happen. The first year of being married to him in Mansfield was a kind of slow rehearsal of obedience. We rented a one-bedroom across the river, near the gas station that the Saturday field service group met behind. I worked part-time at the bakery. He worked at his father's HVAC shop and was on the school for ministerial servants. We had family worship night every Tuesday at 7 o'clock sharp. He chose the chapter. He led the prayer. I poured the water. He gave the comments at the Watchtower's study on Sunday and looked over at me when he said the words submission and headship, and I would dip my head a little, the way the older sisters had taught me by example for 15 years. He came home at 5:47 every night. The front door had a sticky bottom hinge that you had to lift. The click of that hinge every weekday at 5:47. I can still hear it in a room with the windows closed. The Kingdom Hall was beige brick off a county road, and our apartment was beige carpet and a framed Proverbs 3:5-6 over the couch. And I do not think for the first 13 months I ever sat in a chair that was not pointed toward something I was supposed to be improving inside myself. Saturday mornings were field service. 8 o'clock, the parking lot of the Mansfield North congregation, paper coffee cups from the gas station across the road, the laminated territory maps damp from the dew on someone's car hood. We were a young married couple in the territory. People liked us. The older sisters would catch my arm afterward and say, "You are doing so well, Sister Hoffman. You are such a fine example to the younger ones." I would smile. I would say, "Oh, all the credit goes to Daniel." That was the line. The credit goes to him. The accounting goes to him. The drawer in the nightstand goes to him. I just did not know yet about the drawer. My wedding band was plain, thin, no diamond. Daniel's was the same. 2 flat bands, no engraving. The magazines had taught us against extravagance. The plainness was a thing I was proud of in those years. I thought it meant we were serious. Now, when I look at the band in the same box where I keep the notebook, I think, there was nothing engraved on the inside, because there was nothing inside that he was willing to put his name to. It was in the second year that I first saw him writing in the notebook. He was sitting on his side of the bed in a white undershirt. The lamp was on. He had the small blue notebook open on his knee, and he was holding the cheap blue ballpoint he kept in the drawer, and I came out of the bathroom in my long white nightgown, and I looked at him and I asked, "What are you working on?" And he said, "Just keeping a record." He smiled. He said, "It is a good practice to keep a record of how the household is doing spiritually." He closed the notebook and he put it in the top drawer of his nightstand, and he turned out the light. I lay there in the dark, and I told myself the kind of story you tell yourself when you are 19 years old and your husband is the spiritual head of your house. I told myself, he is being faithful. I told myself, he is being thorough. I told myself, this is what a brother who is being groomed for elder is supposed to do. I did not open the drawer. I did not for a long time. I want you to understand, there was nothing in me that was looking for proof. I was looking for ways to be approved. Let me step back from the kitchen of that apartment for a minute and tell you what was actually written in published Watchtower literature about a husband's authority over his wife's body. Because the small blue notebook in the drawer of Daniel Hoffman's nightstand was not the deviance of one strange man. It was a man following the curriculum. The doctrine is called headship. It is not a metaphor. In our religion, the husband is the spiritual head of the wife, the way Christ is the head of the congregation, the way Jehovah is the head of Christ. That hierarchy is taught from the platform of every kingdom hall on earth, from the time a girl is old enough to sit still through a meeting. We were taught the chain of command before we were taught the alphabet. Jehovah, then Christ, then the husband, then the wife. The line goes one way. Information flows up. Authority flows down. That is the entire shape of the household. The Watchtower magazine has, over decades, returned again and again to a husband's responsibility to monitor. That is the word the literature uses. To monitor his wife's spirituality, her conduct, her speech, her associations, her thoughts. The Awake magazine printed articles on warning signs of spiritual sickness in the wife: irritability, withdrawal, lack of interest in family worship, lack of interest in conjugal relations. Lack of interest in conjugal relations was listed in a Watchtower study article I sat through in the Mansfield North congregation when I was 20, as a possible early indicator of spiritual decline in the sister. The brothers in the audience nodded. My husband nodded. I dipped my head. There is a manual. The elders use it. It is called Shepherd the Flock of God. It is a small, dark gray book distributed to appointed brothers only. Daniel had a copy in the drawer of his nightstand because he was being groomed. The manual instructs elders, in plain language, that a husband may bring matters of his wife's conduct to the body of elders if he believes she is failing to submit. There is no corresponding instruction for a wife to bring matters of her husband's conduct to anyone. That is not an accident. That is the architecture. The scriptures used to support this come up over and over. Ephesians 5:22, wives be in subjection to your husbands. Colossians 3:18, 1 Peter 3:1, and then, lower down in the rotation, but always there, 1 Corinthians 7:5, the verse Daniel had marked with a small cross in the margin of the column where I had said no. That verse, in the way the organization teaches it, says that a wife does not have authority over her own body, and a husband does not have authority over his own body, but they have authority over each other. The way it is preached from the platform, that verse becomes a closed loop. Refusing intimacy is not a personal limit. Refusing intimacy is a defrauding of your spouse. A defrauding is a sin. A sin can be brought to the elders. The path is intentional. Layer on top of that the two-witness rule. If a sister is being abused inside her own home, verbally, sexually, in any way that is hidden, and she goes to the elders to report, she is required to produce a second witness to the act. Not testimony, witness. A second person who saw it happen. Inside a marriage. Inside a closed bedroom. The two-witness rule, written into the Shepherd the Flock manual, means that nothing a husband does to his wife in private is institutionally provable, which means it is institutionally permissible. The system did not build a roof over the abuser. The system removed the floor from under the woman. That is the difference. And headship, on top of that two-witness floor, gives the husband a stewardship language. He is accountable to Jehovah for her, which means he must know what she is doing, which means he must know who she is talking to, what she is reading, what she is wearing, where she is going. Which means in some marriages, in mine, he must know when she is bleeding, and when she is willing, and when she is not. The notebook in Daniel's drawer was headship doctrine, applied. He was not a deviant brother, he was an excellent one. Let me step out of the explanation for a minute and say something to you directly. A lot of you have been writing to me, asking how you can help me keep doing this. So I left a support page in the first comment of this video. That is where it is, right at the top. What you give helps me keep recording, helps me keep the lights on, helps me keep saying these things out loud for the women still inside and afraid to look. If it is not your moment, that is all right too. Back to the story. It was a Tuesday in the second year of our marriage that I opened the drawer. He had left at 5:47 that morning for a service call across the county, and he had forgotten to lock the small brass key in the kitchen drawer where he usually kept it. The nightstand had a flimsy lock that any house key in America could turn. I did not plan to open it. I had been making the bed. I had pulled the corner of the fitted sheet too hard, and his alarm clock had fallen off and rolled under the nightstand. And I knelt down to get it. And the bottom drawer was already a little open, and I saw the corner of the small blue notebook against the wood. And I just looked at it for a long time. The way you look at something you have been not looking at for a year and a half. I opened the drawer. I sat down on his side of the bed in my long skirt and my cardigan buttoned to the top. I opened the notebook. The handwriting was his, neat, slightly leaning, the way a young brother writes notes during the Watchtower study. The first dated column went back to October 2018, just over a year into our marriage. The most recent entry was the previous Sunday. Sunday. He had written in it after I went to bed on Sunday. The columns were labeled. He had labeled them. Cycle start. Intimacy. Willingness, 1 to 5. There were notes in the margins. Some of them were scriptural references. 1 Corinthians 7:5, next to a column where I had said no. He had marked a small cross in the margin. There were other notes. The first 6 months, I was a lot of 5s. By the second year, I was a lot of 2s and 3s. There was a note in May of the previous year that simply said, headache, again. There was a note in August that said, irregular, possible spiritual cause. I had been having spotting between cycles that summer because I was 19 and frightened all the time, and my body was telling me what my mind had not yet been allowed to know. I read every page. I read the way you read your own funeral notice. I read until my hands were cold and my mouth tasted like metal. I closed the notebook. I put it back where it had been, the same angle, the same page touching the wood. I closed the drawer. I made the bed the rest of the way. I did not cry. I did not say a word out loud in that apartment for the rest of the day. I went to the bakery at 4 o'clock for the evening shift, and I stood in the back room slicing a sheet pan of warm sourdough boules, and Megan, she worked the front. She was 33 then, divorced, a mother of one, what we called worldly. Megan came back and looked at my face and said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "I am fine." And she did not believe me, and she did not push. I will never forget that. She did not push. That mattered later. I went home that night at 9:30. He was at the Tuesday family worship preparation for the next week. I sat on the couch under the framed proverbs, and I looked at my own hands, and I thought, he wrote down that I was tired in May. He wrote down that I bled wrong in August. He wrote down that I said no on a Sunday in March, and he marked a cross next to it. And I am supposed to be the one who is failing to submit. That was the first night I understood with my whole body that the cage was not Daniel. The cage was the thing that had taught Daniel that the cage was love. He was inside it too, and I was inside it with him. And the small blue notebook was not his. It was a piece of furniture that came with the headship doctrine, and 1,000 other young brothers in 1,000 other beige apartments were writing in their own notebooks that night, and underlining 1 Corinthians 7:5 in pen, and 1,000 other 19-year-old wives in long white nightgowns were not opening their drawers. I stayed almost 6 more years. I want you to know that. I did not run. I did not even change my hair. I went to the Watchtower study the next Sunday and gave the comment Daniel had outlined for me on the back of an envelope, and I dipped my head when he said the word submission, and I went home and made dinner. I did not have anywhere to go yet. The conversation that ended my marriage took place in the summer of 2024, when I was 25. No, I had turned 26 in the March before that summer. And Megan asked me, "Do you ever get to choose anything just because it makes you happy?" I went home that night, and I did not open the drawer again, because I did not have to. I already knew what was in it. I am 26 now, 26 and 4 months out. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I do not know my neighbors. I see a therapist twice a week. She has not asked me to forgive anyone. She has asked me to name what happened in the smallest words I can find, and to say it back to myself until the words stop sliding around. I read a lot these days. Books my mother would have called Satan's classroom in another life. Books on coercive control. Books on cult dynamics. Books that were on the public library's open shelf the whole time I was 19, and underlining 1 Corinthians 7:5, and that I did not know existed because the only library I was allowed in was the one in our living room with the framed proverbs over it. I cut my hair to my shoulders last month. I had not cut it past my shoulder blades since I was 13 years old. The hairdresser asked me if I was sure. I said, "I have been sure for 10 years. A woman wrote to me a few weeks ago and said, "But if your husband never hit you, was it really that bad?" I have been thinking about her since. The notebook never hit me either. The doctrine never hit me either. The cross in the margin next to the Sunday I said no never hit me. And here I am, 4 months out, learning to recognize the sound of my own voice when there is nobody grading it for submission. Megan still works at the bakery in Mansfield. She drives over to Columbus once a month with a paper bag of the same sourdough boule from that back room, and we sit on the floor of my apartment, and she lets me cry when I need to, and she does not fix me, and she does not push. My older brother Michael has not spoken to me in 7 months. My niece Lily is 4, and my nephew Caleb is 2, and there is a photograph of them, that I am not supposed to have, taped inside the door of a kitchen cabinet in this apartment. My mother crosses the street when she sees me at the Kroger in Mansfield. The last sentence she said to my face was, "Until you return to Jehovah, you are not my daughter." The notebook is in a cardboard box under the bed in this apartment. I have not opened it again. I do not need to. I know what every column says. I kept it because I needed it to be physical evidence in this world of a doctrine that claims to be invisible. Headship is not invisible. Headship has handwriting. Headship has a date column for the start of your bleeding. Headship rates your willingness on a scale from 1 to 5 and writes a small cross in the margin next to the Sunday you said no. Daniel is an elder now. He was appointed 6 months after I was disfellowshipped. He is remarried within the congregation. His new wife is 19 years old, the same age I was when I first saw him writing in the small blue notebook on his knee. I think about her sometimes. I do not pray for her because I do not know how to pray anymore. But I think about her. I hope the bottom drawer is locked. I hope she is the kind of girl who does not look. I hope she is the kind of girl who does. I do not know which is the mercy. What I want to leave you with is this. Outside the Kingdom Hall, what my husband was allowed to do to me, the surveillance of my body, the rating of my willingness, the scriptural justification for ignoring my no, would be called coercive control in any state in this country. There are women right now on the witness stand of family courts in Columbus and Cleveland and Toledo describing exactly what Daniel did, and judges are calling it abuse and signing protective orders. Inside the Kingdom Hall, the same behavior is called headship. The same behavior performed by an appointed brother is called grounds for further appointment. The doctrine is the crime. Daniel was the man following it. If you grew up in a house where your silence was called your virtue, if you grew up underlining 1 Corinthians 7:5 in pen because someone older told you that was what a worthy sister did, if you ever, even once, felt like your body was a stewardship someone else was being graded on, I see you. You were not the failing wife. You were the woman a doctrine was being practiced on. If you stayed with me all the way through this one, thank you. The support link is in the first comment if anything in this story reached you tonight. Freedom hurts less than obedience, I promise you that.